If you've ever looked at your debt and thought, I don't even know where to start, don't worry, you're not alone. You may feel alone, but I promise you, you're not alone. And you don't have to figure it all out today, okay? In this episode, we're going to break it down into simple, doable steps so you can take back control, release that shame, and finally start moving forward. Welcome to the Female Finance Collective podcast, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about all things money.
I'm Jen, and I struggled for many years with debt and feeling financially overwhelmed, so I know how frustrating it can be.
And I'm Mary Lee. As a financial planner, I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of women who've transformed their financial lives.
Hey, I'm Sybil. I built my dream life traveling the world and creating financial freedom on a teacher's salary.
Let's start the money conversation. That's right. Because debt can feel really overwhelming. And if it's not feeling overwhelming, it's probably because maybe you're pretending it's not there, right? I know that there was times where I went from like, it's so overwhelming, I've got this cloud over my head, I can't stop thinking about it, to like, maybe I'll just pretend it doesn't exist because that's easier, right? And less stressful. In the end, it's not less stressful, but it definitely does feel that way in the moment. Excuse me. So today we want to talk about how to just get started, because I think that's the hardest part. That was the hardest part for me. I just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think is the first, like, step one? This is going to be what every single person who's getting ready to tackle their debt should do.
Well, really, we have to start there in our mindset, right? Because we are overwhelmed and we can't move forward in a systematic or effective way in the state of overwhelm. So we really need to shift our mindset. We need to shift it and normalize debt. You are not alone. I don't know what the exact stats are. We could Google them real quick, but many people carry debt, and feeling overwhelmed about debt is super common. So, just by listening to this podcast, we want you to be shifting that mindset. Okay. So, you don't want to ignore it. You also don't want to stay in the state of overwhelm. Okay. And you also don't want to stay in the state of thinking you're alone. And so finding people like us, the Female Finance Collective, and knowing and telling yourself, I'm not alone, I can do something, is a small, important shift in your future journey of paying off that debt, right? So just reframing it of, I'm here with other people. I can do something about it. And that's a choice I might want to make, or I am going to make. And that's going to allow me to start moving forward. So I'd say that's just the very first thing we need to do is just think about that mindset.
Absolutely. That was my number one thing. I was like, I'm the only one. Nobody else is struggling with this. Like, I don't know who to talk to because it's so embarrassing. And so I think there's huge power in getting over that, right? Remembering you're not alone. There's a ton of people and you can't ignore it, right? We're just going to move forward. I think that also reminding yourself that you are making a choice to pay this off, right? And there's power in making that choice. We've talked about budgets feeling like a consequence before, how some people feel like, oh, this budget, it's like my consequence because I had debt, or this budget is my consequence because I don't make as much money, or whatever it is. But choosing to pay off your debt isn't a consequence, or a punishment because you accumulated debt. It is empowering because you're like, I'm going to take this situation that I'm in and I'm going to take control of it and start improving it. And that is the huge, I think that's the other piece of that mindset shift.
There's no better day than today,
Right.
right? It's okay. You got to let that go. I'm going to start changing that mindset today.
100%.
Yeah.
So I think the second thing that you really need to do is to figure out where you are, get very clear on your numbers. And for some people, I know we've talked with people in the Female Finance Collective community who are like, I don't want to know my numbers. They're like, There was one woman who it took her months to actually figure out her numbers, and she was so proud of her when she finally did, proud of herself, because she just did not want to know where she was financially. And this, you have to, right?
Yep.
No matter how hard it is, like set up a date with yourself, fix your favorite meal, pour yourself your favorite drink, right? Like if it's a milkshake or a glass of wine, whatever it is, it'll just be like, this is my special thing. I'm doing a special thing with myself. And you're just going to go through and look at every account you have. You're going to look at your balances. You're going to look at how much you owe and get very clear on where you are with your numbers financially.
Yeah, it's so, so important. So I want to tell you a little story about a client that I was working with over the last few weeks. And he, like many of us, including Jen and I at times in our lives, weren't tracking at all. We were just spending, right? We have a couple credit cards, we're making some money, and we're spending money, just going through life in that way, not clear on the numbers at all, not wanting to be clear on the numbers. But he decided, he made that decision to change that. He started tracking his numbers, and together we did a lot of categorization for a while. And what this allowed him to see was magical and became not scary anymore, but actually motivating. And so, one of the biggest categories or areas of spending in his life that did not align with his values was restaurants and bars. When he looked at how much he was actually spending in that category every month, he was shocked. He had no idea that he was spending that much, right? Because you would just pay the bill at the end of the night and you're not thinking about it, right? And so immediately it actually motivated him, like, oh my gosh, I have got to cut this, because he was really looking for a way to set up some financial goals of travel, of savings for a future home, things like this, right? Which many of us have. Um, but it was so transformational to him to see that. And then he also had to think about, okay, so if I want to cut that category, how am I going to do that? Right. And so the next step of actually, once you start tracking, start categorizing, start just getting clear on those numbers, is to do that reflection, right? It came pretty quick to him which category he really needed to work on first. But the how do you spend less at restaurants and bars can be a little bit trickier, right? And so that reflection time and talking about it with me, and really motivating himself to do it was such an important part after he got those numbers cleared, right? And then you have to think like, okay, I have some debt. How do I get to zero? And then how do I get to these savings goals? Right? And so we had to figure out, like, if you can cut this much a month, that annually is going to be this much, right? But next time you go out to a restaurant, how are you only going to spend what you want to spend, and or go to a restaurant less often, right? So like the how part became so important once you became clear on those numbers. But it's amazing how the mindset shifted from I can't do this, I'm scared, to motivated to do this. Oh my gosh, that doesn't align with what I want to be spending my money on.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key. That is why your numbers, why you need to know them,
Yep.
right? 100%. No matter how scary it is, no matter how embarrassed you're going to feel when you look at what you've been spending your money on, it doesn't matter. This is a private moment with you. You're on your own journey. You're going to look at your numbers. You're going to figure out where your money's going, how much money you owe. And then you can start to do what Sybil was saying her client did. You can start to really think about, how can I make changes? How can I spend less in this category? And what will I do about it? You can't just say, well, I'm going to go out to restaurants less without thinking like, oh, do I know how to cook? Can I cook food at home? How will I get my groceries? How am I going to, right? Like it's a snowball effect or maybe more like dominoes. I'm not sure in this case because it's more like dominoes, right? Like you make one change and then it's going to start to impact other things. So take a little bit of time and just come up with a plan. Okay, I do want to spend less here, so how am I going to make that happen? And it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It can be one step at a time. You don't have to solve the world's problems all in one meeting, right? You can just start to figure one thing out at a time. Maybe once you get that tackled, you're like, okay, now how do I cut back in this category? You can kind of get that tackled as well. The other little like asterisk I want to remind you is we always say we are not here to tell you to cut all the joy out of your life, right?
Right.
So Sybil was never going to tell that client, you can't go to bars and restaurants ever again. Like that is not where we're at, right? If you realize your amount is, oh, I'm spending a fortune going out for lunch every day, we might say, how about you take your lunch 3 days a week and just go out to lunch 2 days a week? We're not saying cut everything that is joyful in your life, but just to start to see how you can shift things to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And then paying attention to that because you're going to stay clear on those numbers. You're going to keep categorizing. You're going to keep looking at it, right? It definitely doesn't happen overnight, for sure.
I wish.
I know. The human brain just doesn't work that way.
No, it's a
Yeah.
process. It would be amazing if it did. All right. So when it comes to getting ready to pay off your debt, we've kind of gone through this mindset shift, right? You've thought about your money, your debt, you've kind of got your mind wrapped around this plan that you want to take to tackle your debt. Then you've gotten really clear on the numbers, you've figured out where you are financially, and now you need to start, right? Take some action. You've already taken action. I don't want to diminish the things you've already done. But now we're actually going to start making the debt smaller, right? We're going to put our
Yes.
little plan and our mindset into action. So what do you think, Sybil, is a great place for people to start? Because it can feel super overwhelming.
It can. It can. So, really, by listening to podcasts like this and learning, right? So, starting to learn about debt pay repayment strategies, right?
Mhm.
Because you're probably in a place where you just feel like, I don't know how to do it. Even if you've become motivated by clearing looking at those numbers, you need to start learning about different ways that people out there, just like you, because remember, you're not alone, are repaying their debt, right? And so I personally, every money move I make, it always starts with learning. And I'm constantly learning about money, even if I'm not in that situation, just because I know that someday I don't want to be in that situation, or I might be in that situation if it's something I want to be in. So I would really say start learning about repayment strategies. And we're going to help you with that. And we already have some past episodes on that, right? Jen, should we share just a couple major repayment strategies that a lot of people use?
Yes, I think so. Because
Okay.
I think that if you've started thinking about debt payoff and you've started maybe you know how when you learn a new word or you hear something, then you start to hear it all the time, right?
Yes.
Well, if you've started kind of thinking about debt payoff, maybe you've heard of these, but there are two main methods for paying off your debt. And the first one is Snowball. And that's when you pay off your smallest debt first and then use that money to pay off your next smallest debt and then use all of that money to pay off the next smallest debt. So your amount that you're contributing towards your debt snowballs and it helps you pay it off more quickly instead of just paying little bits to each of those debts at a time. The second one is called Debt Avalanche. And this is when you tackle the highest interest rate first to help you save money long term. So if you, let's say you have four debts and you have one that's like 32%, one that's 28, 20, so whatever, you're going to start with the 32% interest rate. You're going to pay that one off first. And then you're going to move that money to the next highest interest rate. For some people, this one doesn't make a ton of sense because if you have multiple credit cards, they're probably all a very similar interest rate. And so this one doesn't make as much sense for some people. However, if you have one that has an extremely high interest rate, you might want to look at paying that one off first and then maybe moving to the snowball method, right? To figure out what plan makes sense for you. You really have to, again, be familiar with your numbers, know how much interest you're paying, and know what those balances are.
For sure. And the debt snowball is really a win if for your mindset, because you get that reward of I paid off that small debt, and that motivates you and keeps you going. So that's why a lot of people love that, because mindset matters. And then some people love the debt avalanche because it's the method that will actually help you pay it fastest, because your highest interest ones are, you're paying more interest on those if you wait to pay those off later, even if it's a smaller amount, right? So there's not a right or wrong. And that's why we say you need to start learning. You need to start learning about these two. You need to start learning about other options that other people do, because it might be something different for you, right? And then start playing with those numbers as you learn about them. So we're going to teach you a lot more about these two strategies next week. Okay. So if you're like, what is this debt snowball, debt avalanche? You can do a couple things. You could go to YouTube or your favorite podcast and just search it and listen to it. Or you could wait for, or I should say, because I'm always a believer of the more the better when you're learning. Listen in next week when we specifically teach you about these two real common debt repayment strategies.
Definitely. Um, So, another strategy, if you will, is we're in Female Finance Collective. We're going to be running again. Done this once. We're going to do it again. A debt payoff group, and it's going to be for 6 weeks. We're going to walk through the process together. So we're going to walk through the things we've talked about in this episode together. Week one, we're going to get really familiar with our numbers. We're going to learn all about them. We're going to move into we're going to use the debt snowball method. It doesn't mean you couldn't use Avalanche in the group, but that's the one we're going to use. We are going to give you a debt snowball calculator so you can enter all your information. It's going to calculate all those payments for you. It's going to show you visually how long it will take to pay everything off. It's going to show you exactly how many dollars to pay towards each debt every month. And we're really going to walk through that process together. I'll be available for coaching and answering questions throughout the 6 weeks. But it is a really great tool. It worked really well for some of our members last time.
Really
They
well.
were able to make huge progress, really start to feel motivated, and they are now well on their way to having their debt paid off because they were able to create a plan and get started on it. Like 6 weeks starting something is a good amount of time
It's really, really powerful.
to
Yeah.
really get that ball rolling. And so, if that would be helpful to you, we would love to have you join the Female Finance Collective community and get in on that. It's our community is just $5 a month, and that gets you that includes the debt payoff group. So, if that's something that interests you, we're going to be starting that. In I think it's the third week of September, we're going to be kicking that off. And then if right now, or maybe you're hearing this episode later, we're going to run it again, probably in January, because I know the beginning of the year is a time when a lot of people are ready to get their finances in order. But we would love to have you, like, if you're ready now, if you're listening now and you're like, you know what, this is where I'm at, I really need to make these changes, then this is your time,
You
right?
need to
Let's do
join us.
it.
This is your sign. Okay, well, thank you so much for listening in today. We want to leave you with a call to action. If you're feeling overwhelmed, we want you to remember that you're not alone and that you don't have to figure it all out today. Okay? So really start thinking about that mindset, getting clear with your numbers, and then choose your starting point. What are you going to learn about? Are you going to join us in the community for the debt group? What are you going to do first? Okay, so think about that and The link will be below to join us in the community. And be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.